Welcome back to Urban Outlook. We are talking to Elizabeth Gedmark, who is Vice President of A Better Balance, and Kameron, the staff attorney for that organization, and having a really interesting but tough conversation about the issues that women are facing in the workplace just because they're pregnant. And before we took a break, we talked about how the accommodations, the list of accommodations that some women have, which seem really simplistic and common sense, but they're still struggling. So when you look at the numbers, or have looked at the numbers through the years, it seems like there's an ever growing number of women who are finding themselves stuck and having to file lawsuits against their employer. Can't really put them in a good position if they have to do that, but it seems like that's the last resort. They're forced to do that.
That's right, and we do take on some clients, so we have had to do that as well. But the thing is that there's actually 27 states who have a Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. And what we have seen in those states is that that law actually provides clarity so that the employer and the employee can sit down together and discuss what is a reasonable accommodation and what should be provided, so they don't have to resort to litigation. That's one of the reasons that we're pushing for a law like that here in Tennessee and nationwide, because we would like to see that result here in Tennessee so that those workers don't have to resort to going to court. They don't want to. They just want that accommodation immediately so that they can stay healthy.
I'm going to ask what may seem like a silly question, but it's 2019, 2020. Why are we still having this conversation? It's not like it's the first time that a woman has shown up and they've got a baby bump. What in the world is going through the minds of some of these corporations and employers that they haven't seen the need, it seems, in some cases, to provide very simple things for women who just want to work?
It's a great question, and I think that some of it is because of this confusion around the law, that you may have HR that says, well, we just have to do it this way because it's been our policy forever. You do still have some workplaces where there are women trailblazers, and they say, you know, I'm actually the first pregnant woman at this startup or at this construction job. There still are some very traditionally male-dominated workplaces. Is
the law a crutch, though? Because HR policies can sometimes stand alone if they're done for the right reasons, right? From the law. So do they sometimes use the lack of clarity in the law as a crutch to not do anything?
I think they do. I think that that's exactly right. I think that sometimes they use it as an excuse because they don't want to have to deal with it. They think it's a headache, or they do still have some of these old sexist notions that when you're pregnant, you shouldn't be working. You should be at home. But as Kameron said, that's really not workable for so many women who are the breadwinners for their families.
Yeah. So what can women do? Where can they start? How can they get help?
So one of the things that women can do is they could call our hotline. It's a free and confidential legal resource, and it's 1-833-NEED-ABB, so that's 633-322. They could call that hotline, and we will take some of their information down and then give them an explanation of the laws that might apply to them. If we find that they need a legal resource or they have questions about an attorney referral, we can direct them to resources within their state. And since we are the Southern office, we don't just service Tennessee, we service all the Southern states. Okay. So we have a survey of all the laws that apply. There are state and local laws that go a bit further than federal laws, and so we can explain that to the person who's calling, give them a fact sheet, give them advice on how to talk with their employer, and see if they're interested in self-advocating.
You talked about those 27 states. Are those mostly southern states or northern states that are part of that group that already sort of has some things in place for women who are pregnant?
Well, what's interesting is that the 27 states that have Pregnant Workers Fairness Acts are all across the map. So it's very different from sometimes you see other laws and it's just on the coast or it's just in the north. But Kentucky, for example, just passed a Pregnant Workers Act that was earlier this year in 2019 that A Better Balance worked very hard on. So you are seeing momentum and bipartisan support for this type of legislation.
So where do you go from here then when it comes to, obviously you probably want to add more states, but where else do you see A Better Balance sort of really sort of getting in there and making a difference, making an impact?
There is so much that our working women and working caregivers need in this state. So pregnancy accommodations would go a long way. We also need paid family leave. the United States is one of just 3 countries in the whole world that does not provide paid maternity leave to our workers. And we're seeing a growing number of states that are providing paid family leave, and we'd like to see Tennessee and other states, other southern states, add to that list. So that not only when you have a new baby, but if you are taking care of a spouse or an elderly parent who has, God forbid, cancer or some terrible illness, you don't have to lose your job or sacrifice weeks and weeks or months of your paycheck. You should actually be able to draw on something like an insurance program so that you can afford to take care of your loved ones.
So the Family Medical Leave Act doesn't help in that regard when you have a sick loved one?
The Family and Medical Leave Act is helpful in that it provides for unpaid leave for up to 12 weeks, but only for eligible employees.
Gotcha.
And 40% of the workforce are not eligible for the law.
Wow. When you talk about the time off, tell me a little bit more about what's lacking there. Because I guess in some cases, if you know you're expecting, you can kind of plan ahead, save that sick leave, right? And so therefore you can work along a certain time frame, or not work, rather, stay off a certain time frame as long as you've got that sick leave to cover, right? And then after you get beyond that sick leave, then what happens?
And so what we're finding is from our callers that first they're getting put off the job earlier than expected. And so that eats into the 12 weeks that they have already tried to save for maternity leave.
And the reason for saying to stop earlier than expected is a safety concern, I bet?
Well, in many times it's an employer misconception because they are pregnant that they need to take off time earlier than expected. Sometimes it is for prenatal appointments, but other times it is because employers feel that the pregnant worker is not able to do the job. And that's without medical certification, that's without having a conversation on what accommodations the pregnant worker might need. And so afterwards, they're put on maternity leave for the 12 weeks or whatever time they have left, and the FMLA does entitle workers to job restoration. That's if they're eligible for the FMLA. If they're not, we try to point workers in the direction of state laws that might offer additional job restoration protection. But if there's no protection there, workers are left guessing if their job or their position is still there. And many times they're left searching for a new job.
So talk a little bit about that, because I thought that was one of the things that that was allowed. So they have to provide you some sort of a job. It may not be the exact job when you return, but you have to have a place at that place of employment. Is that not the case?
So that is the case if they are eligible for the FMLA. If they're eligible
for FMLA. Okay, gotcha. And as you said, 40% of folks aren't eligible.
That's right. So if you haven't worked there for 12 months before you give birth, you're not eligible. Or if you are a part-time worker, you may not be eligible if you haven't hit the right number of hours. And also if you work for a smaller workplace with less than 50. And the other thing I would say to your question is that a lot of workers, believe it or not, do not have paid sick days. So that's another thing that A Better Balance has worked on. And there are now very many cities and states across the country that do require some paid sick days. But Tennessee is not one of those states, and nor is Nashville.
And again, I don't see pregnancy as being a sick kind of situation, right? But I think about how can you best use that time. So either you're going to use your paid time off, your vacation time, or your sick time to give you that amount of time to stay home with the baby after the baby comes. At least that's how some businesses do, I know.
Right, that's how some of them do. So, you know, you hear from workers who are cobbling together, I've got this many sick days, and they say I can use this one and roll over
this many vacation days, exactly, in order to give you that length of time.
And they're stuck because you have that, you don't have paid family leave. And if you had paid family leave, imagine how wonderful it would be to come back and have a sick day for when that baby gets the flu or needs to go in for their checkup, instead of scrambling when you're already having a very difficult time coming back to work.
We've got like 30 seconds left. I want to make sure we get that hotline one more time.
So it's 1-833-NEED-ABB. So that's 633-322.
1-833-NEED-ABB. A Better Balance is the name of the organization. So if women need help, or just have questions in general about what they're dealing with, then you're that resource for us. Thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate both of you. An interesting conversation, tough conversation in many regards, but I hope we shared some great information for women who are needing these services. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you again next time.